تطرز نفسي بالجمال حياتيا ويرنو فؤادي للمقادير راقيا مدين إلى ربي بكل جزيلة وما أرتضي دنيا بغير إلهيا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم.
S.A.W. I'm stepping on something here. Stay to the ground. Okay. I have a tendency to ruin the technology, so I want to make sure I don't break anything. Okay, so the topic that we're talking about today is the topic of, let's see if this works. There we go. Of balancing our deen and our dunya. And it's a really important topic for anyone at any stage in your life, really, figuring out where that balance is. How are you able to continue your day-to-day life? How are you able to go to school, work, take care of a family if you have a family, have a social life with friends, and still maintain that connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which we know is supposed to be the essence of our life, which we know that as we are individuals, we're created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how do we maintain that balance? Of being able to live in the dunya, but still maintaining our deen, and work towards the ikhlas in everything that we do. So, I want you to imagine with me for a minute that in our lives, every day, we do juggling acts, right? We're all juggling a million things all the time, right? So I want you to imagine that this ball here represents your family, your friends, the people in your life that are important, the people that take up time, the people that take up energy, the people that you interact with daily. And this one here represents your work, or your school, or your education, your journey towards your livelihood, essentially. And this one here, this distracting one, represents the entertainment that you live through. Okay, so the things that you do that are enjoyable, maybe whether it's being on the computer or TV, whatever it is that you're doing in your life that's entertainment. Okay, and so you see, it's already hard to juggle these, right? And then I want you to imagine that this one, this last one here, represents your deen, your Iman, your faith, your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I want you to imagine that you spend every day of your life trying to juggle all of these things, right? So let's say this one was what? Our work, our livelihood, our education. If you drop that one, what happens? Nothing, right? It's not really scathed. If you fail a test, if you don't show up to class, right? That one you can always pick it back up and it will still be whole. Nothing would happen to it, right? Your friends and your family. How many of you gotten arguments with your family at times, or with your friends, or gotten upset at them, or dropped them? What happens? Nothing happens. It's not the end of everything, right? Essentially, you can pick it back up. You can find new friends. You can patch things up with your family, right? Now the one with the entertainment. You drop this one, it totally bounces back, right? So there's no issue when you drop that one, right? Now let's assume that this is your Iman, right? This is your faith. If I drop this one, what happens? I'm not going to drop it because it belongs to my son and he'll be very upset. So this one breaks, right? You don't want to drop this one. Because in that constant juggling that we're doing, as we're constantly trying to balance everything, the only one that we need to hold on to, the only part of that balancing act that we need to maintain at all times and guard as much as possible is our Iman, is our faith. Okay, what lies in our heart. Because if we safeguard our heart, if we make sure that our heart is pure and our intentions are pure, and what we do in life, in everything, is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, suddenly the balancing act becomes much easier. Suddenly all of the balls are able to stay up because we're holding on to the one that really matters. And that's really what I want you to visualize as you're going through your day-to-day, as you're going through everything that you go through in your life. that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. He does not burden anyone more than they can bear. And so that's why we know that whatever we're juggling, inshallah, it's never going to be too much for us. As long as we have that faith, as long as we have that Iman, and we keep that one as the solid one that doesn't move. So I want you guys to think about a movie. Have you ever heard of the movie The Bucket List? Have you heard of that movie, The Bucket List? Yeah, you've heard of it, okay. It was a few years back that it came out, and it was a movie about these two really old guys. And I think they found out that they were going to die. So they decided to do all of these things that they had on the bucket list. What's the bucket list? Have you heard of that expression before? What is bucket list? It's like stuff you want to do before you die, right? So that's the bucket list. So in the movie, these two older guys decide that they have to, I don't know, go skydiving. They have to go climb Mount Everest. They have to do all of these crazy things, things that are part of the dunya. And all of these things, they felt like if they accomplished them, then they could die happy. So as Muslims, we shouldn't have that kind of a bucket list, okay? We shouldn't have the bucket list that's so tied to the dunya. But we need to create our own Muslim life bucket list that helps us get to the S.A.W. A list of things that we need to accomplish in that short time we have in the dunya that will help us achieve the balance in our deen, that will help us reach the S.A.W. inshallah, and hopefully Jannah inshallah. So that's really what we need to focus on. I'm creating a list of the important things in our lives that we can do day to day while we have this short time on earth that will inshallah lead us hopefully to Jannah. So really when you think about it, I mean, we all know that there's certain things that we need to accomplish while we're here on earth, right? I mean, our Salah, we need to excel in our Salah, right? We need to excel in our ibadah. We need to excel in our relations with individuals for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we know that we have to do these things, right? But sometimes something gets in our way. Something stops us. And I think it was really cute, the video that the John Jay people made with the Salah, where there was, if you guys saw the trailer, it was really cute where, you know, one guy gets up for Salah right away, the other guy wants to finish the paper first, and then he realizes, you know what, it's not worth it, I'm going to get up for Salah. And we all experience this because we know that even individuals on a daily basis, our Iman fluctuates up and down several times during the day. So subhanAllah, you might wake up, you know, you pray Fajr and you think to yourself, that's it, you know, today's going to be one of those days where inshallah I do everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then between Fajr and Dhuhr, a million things happen between something at school, something with the family, something with your friends, and suddenly you feel far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again. And that's why, subhanAllah, our Salah is such a ni'mah for us. Because with those 5 prayers that we have a day, with those 5 Salah, we're given that opportunity 5 separate times during the day to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to bring us back to this important one, to drop all the other goals and only focus for a few minutes on our Iman, on our conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's really sometimes we get so preoccupied with we don't have enough time, I don't have time to do this, I don't have time to do that. And we don't realize that what we're not doing is taking the time to appreciate what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Taking the time to appreciate the ni'mah that we have in our dunya that will inshallah help us in our deen. So it's really making sure that in everything that we do, we constantly have that kalimat alhamdulillah in our mind. That we're constantly thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what we have and constantly reminding ourselves of what's important. Remembering that all those other goals, if they drop, it's okay, they're going to bounce back. And remembering that the one that's important, the one you want to hold on to, is the one that's most breakable and most easily damaged. So how do we essentially make time for our deen? Because this is really the big question. I mean, people will always tell me, you know, it's hard, you know, I want to pray and I want to, you know, wake up for tahajjud, I want to wake up for fajr, but I know there's no time, I'm always studying, I'm always working, you know, my livelihood takes so much out of me, I don't have time to go to the masjid. So how do we actually make that time? How do we find that time? And there's an interesting story actually, and I usually share it when I'm giving my marriage talks as well, but it really applies to here, to that idea of us not having time. I was counseling a couple once, and the woman was saying that the big issue that she had was that she had no time for herself, that she wanted to memorize the Qur'an, she wanted to get better in her deen, but she just couldn't find the time. And she was a mother, she had a couple of young children, she lived with her in-laws, and she said that she just, you know, her husband never gave her that time alone that she needed. So, you know, I spoke to the husband and I said, you know, your wife needs time for herself. This is what she wants. What are you going to do about it? And so he said, well, you know what, she can have like an hour a week to herself. So we agreed that on the following Friday, she would go upstairs to her room, close the door, and for 1 hour, she would just have that time for herself. So I told her, try it and give me a call afterwards. So she called me that Friday night, and I told her, okay, so how'd it go? And she said, it was awful. And I said, why? So she said, well, I went upstairs to the evening, and I closed the door, and I pulled out the Qur'an, and just as I started reading, I heard, Mom, honey, and they were calling me. So I opened the door, and I felt like I couldn't have that time. So I told her, okay, let's try a different strategy. And she said, no, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to try it again next Friday. So I told her, okay, let's try it again. So she tried it again the next Friday, and she called me afterwards, and she said, you know what, I did it. I stayed in the room, and all I heard was, Mom, just once or twice. And she said, I stayed the whole time. So I told her, okay, good, alhamdulillah, you're all set then. And so she said to me, no, I'm going to do it again. I need to make sure that I've got this, I need this time for myself. And so she did it again the third Friday. And she called me afterwards, and she said, I did it. I stayed in the room, and I stayed for the full hour. And so okay, so how was it? And so she starts crying. She's like, it was awful. So I'm like, why? And she said, nobody knocked. Nobody asked for me. Nobody called for me. And so when I opened the door at the end of the hour, and I went downstairs, I saw my in-laws drinking tea. I saw my husband playing games with the children. Nobody missed me. Nobody even needed me. And I said, subhanAllah, I thought it was time that you needed. And so she said to me, you know what, it's not time that I needed. And I didn't realize that. I had the time, I had the ability to have that time, but what I needed was to feel like I was wanted, to feel that my time was valuable. And so that was the issue. It was a matter not that she couldn't find the time to learn Qur'an. It wasn't that she couldn't find the time to better herself with Deen. It was that she didn't see that her time was valuable. So she didn't see that everything that she did really had a purpose. And so that's why when we think of ourselves, subhanAllah, we think about all that we do in a day, is it really that hard to find an hour a day to do something for our effort? I mean, we've got to 24, right? And yet, subhanAllah, sometimes we're just like, there's no barakah in the time. The time flies by so quickly and we don't understand where it's going. And when we think of the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at that time, people were doing everything by hand, right? There was no iPhone, there was no laptop, there was no TV, there was none of these gadgets that are supposed to do what for us? These gadgets are supposed to do what? What are they intended to do for us when they were invented? Save us time. It was supposed to save us time, actually. The microwave, all these sorts of things, all these gadgets, the blender, the handheld blender, all these sorts of gadgets were intended to save us time. Yet what we see today is that we have less and less time than people did back in the day of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What they accomplished at the time of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they built countries, they built kingdoms, they built amazing things. And yet for us, we feel like we have no time because we're so occupied with these gadgets that are supposed to save us time. So it's really a matter of making sure that you value your time and you partition it in a way that makes sense, in a way that you can say, this is for dunya, but this is for deen. And everything in dunya can be used for deen if you do it in the right intentions. If, for instance, you come to a class or you go to a lecture with the intention that whatever education you receive on that day, you will use it to help yourself in your deen. You will use it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In that, you've just worked towards your akhirah. In that, you've just changed something that was intended for the dunya towards the deen. And the same goes, for instance, in your marriage. If a husband decides to feed a wife a piece of morsel of food in her mouth, that gains him sawab for the akhirah. So every step you take in the dunya can work towards the deen, again, depending on your intentions. So I think it's interesting because when I speak to people a lot of times, they'll say, if only I had one more day of the week, I would get so much done. I would do this and I would do that and I would do that. And so I want you to ask yourselves, if the week didn't have 8 days, let's say you had an 8th day, what would you do with it? It's not going to happen, but what if you had an 8th day? I mean, most of the time when people say, okay, if I had an 8th day, I would probably, do laundry, I'd probably cook more dinner, I'd probably, get this homework done, I'd probably fix the garage that's been broken for however long. And you realize that these are the same things that you would do on the 7th day or on the 6th day, that you wouldn't partition off this day and suddenly make this day the day that you're going to work towards your deen, right? And that's why we don't need the extra time. We simply need to figure out how to partition our time. And I think one of the most interesting things that we see in the shift kind of between the Muslim world and the non-Muslim world is the view of time. Because there's this theorist, his name is Hofstede. And Hofstede came up with these concepts of value dimensions. The value dimensions measured the way that people in different cultures, in different countries, and from different religions viewed different aspects in their lives. And one of those big value dimensions that he looked at was the dimension of time. And he came up with the theory that some cultures and some religions are polychronic and some are monochronic. So monochronic cultures, as in the West, tend to prioritize time. So for instance, how many of you guys have the BlackBerry or the iPhone and use the little scheduler that's on it? Right? Okay. Now, you have something written at 9 o'clock, something at 9:30 probably, something at 10, something at 10:30. Okay? And this is the monochronic side. Because the West teaches us that time is money, right? It's all about time, you can't waste time. And so time becomes like this finite object that we're always rushing against the clock. Most Muslim countries are polychronic. And polychronic people view time as being very fluid, that it's not a fixed entity. Which means if you ever travel to Saudi, for example, to Saudi Arabia, and you hear the adhan, what happens? The adhan for Salah, the call for prayer. What happens? What does everybody do? They stop everything and they go to pray. The stores close. It doesn't matter if you're closing out like a deal with, the top sheikh that's there or whoever it is. It doesn't matter. Everything stops and they attend prayer, right? Because that's polychronic. You recognize that the activity is more important than the time and what's happening at a specific time. So for instance, if you've ever been to, Pakistan or the Bahamas or Egypt or any country that tends to be primarily Muslim or primarily polychronic, and you tell someone, meet me at 8 o'clock, what time are they going to show up? 9, 10, right? I know we've got DC times like midnight, right? Arab time maybe is a little bit before that, 11-ish, okay? But you wouldn't meet them at that specific time. You meet them a lot later because you tend to be polychronic. You think, okay, I first have to have dinner with my family, I first have to pray Salah al-Nafil, I first have to... And it's okay because all of these events are more important than the time that you're actually supposed to meet. And we have a big conflict when we're coming from a Muslim background, intending to be polychronic. And Islam itself preaches to be more polychronic than monochronic. It's really difficult to adjust when we're living in a monochronic society that keeps telling us time is money. And you can't leave class to go pray Salah al-Dhuhr because you're going to miss something. And this is class time. This is not prayer time. And it causes a very big conflict between the monochronic self and the polychronic self. And that's a lot of times where the stressing of time gets very complicated, when you're not quite sure, what should I balance? Which one has to drop? And again, it's always remembering that, go back to the roots, stick to the Islamic model, stick to the polychronic model, respect the fact that, yes, maybe you do have a meeting at 9 o'clock, maybe you do have a meeting at 10 o'clock, but there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to be a little late for this meeting because I need to pray first. Or I'm going to be a little late here because it's Ramadan and I have to go to Dhikr or something. And so making sure that you make that priority, you make that difference. And there's a lot of respect. I think we live in a country, mashallah, that respects multiculturalism to a large extent. And many people, even if they don't understand the polychronic and monochronic concept, once they understand this idea that time can be viewed in two different ways, it's suddenly like the light bulb goes on. And you're like, oh, that's why when I went to Cancun last summer, I was supposed to be at this party at 7, nobody was there until like 10, And it's suddenly like the light bulb goes on. And unfortunately, for many people, like for instance, if you're monochronic, you might see it as a sign of disrespect if somebody doesn't meet you at a allotted time, right? But again, it's a matter of understanding. It's a matter of educating and realizing that, again, in a polychronic society, time is not a fixed entity, and a monochronic one it is. Right, so in terms of, from a religious perspective now, there's a hadith from Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that says, those who are admitted into paradise will not regret or over anything of this world except the time spent without dhikr in their life. So it's the dhikr, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making sure that every time you do something again, you're doing it for that higher purpose. That everything you do, every step you take, again, whether you're getting educated in university, whether you're taking a sip of water, whether you're eating something, whether you're befriending someone, whether you're chatting on Facebook, right? Whether you're doing all sorts of these things, from those balls that we were juggling, anything that you're doing in that juggling act, if you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the higher purpose, knowing that the end is not the dunya, but the end is the end goal, which is achieving the deen, inshallah, then you will be able to get some of the goal. Another hadith that relates to something we touched upon earlier is the hadith from Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that said, if there was one of you in which you washed 5 times a day, would any of your dirt remain? What do you think this is in reference to? Salah, exactly. It's the cleansing of Salah. And the reason why I keep coming back to the importance of Salah is because sometimes hardest things to maintain. It's one of the hardest things to make sure that you pray on time, to make sure that you pray 5 times a day. Right? And sometimes people are just like, I pray in my heart, or I remember Allah, but it's really difficult for me to stop what I'm doing and go to the masjid, or to stop what I'm doing and pray. But then you ask yourself, if you're given this opportunity 5 different times a day, you're given this opportunity again to drop everything and only focus on your faith, and only focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's really a gift, because Allah doesn't need our salah. He doesn't need our prayers. We're the ones that need it. We're the ones that need that time to kind of step away and speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's kind of like, with my kids, when my children are acting up or doing something wrong, what do I do? And no, I don't spank them. What do I do? No, don't do that. No, time out. Exactly. I give them a time out, and I give them that time to be by themselves to kind of think about what they did. And that's almost like with our salah, we get our own personal time outs from that busyness, from that hectic schedule, and that time to really reflect on what our life needs. And if we have that ability, that 5 times a day to cleanse ourselves, to think about what life really means, it makes it more difficult to stray, because you've constantly got that thing to go back to. You've constantly got that time to go back to. So some of the biggest issues that we've talked about so far that cause us to not be able to balance our time, that cause us to not be able to work with our time in the best way, are things such as the technology, such as as I said, the laptop, the iPhone, the Facebook, all those sorts of things. And there's an ayah that Sayyidina Ibrahim used to say, and he would pray, he said, "Oh my Lord, make this city one of peace and security, and preserve me and my children from idol worship." And today we don't say the prayer of idol worship, because we're like, we all pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's one God. We don't associate any idols with God. But in reality, we do. We tend to worship more than just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we make things a priority other than worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we decide to spend more time, for instance, on a video game, or more time on watching a show, or more time on doing something that's taking us away from our deen, it's almost like idolatry. And so the dua that we should say, or the way that we should pray, is that not to protect us from idol, I-D-O-L worship, but to protect us from idol, I-D-L-E worship. Worshiping things that are really idle, that take away from our time without giving us any benefit. Okay? And everything, and again, in Islam we always say that in everything there is bad, but there is also good in it. So in everything that may be negative for us, there can also be good in it, depending on how we use it. So how many of you here procrastinate? Like college students, I'm hoping everyone raises their hand, right? That tendency to know that you have a paper that's due, 2 weeks from now, when are you going to start working on it?
2 weeks from now.
Okay, 2 weeks from now, exactly. Exactly, the night before, you pull the all-nighter, you got the pizza and the soda and the coffee, and you're good to go, okay? We tend to procrastinate. I mean, it's just the way that most of us are. We tend to wait until the last minute to do things. And unfortunately, that procrastination, rather than saving us time, tends to take away from our time. It's because you wind up worrying about this thing that's looming over your head. You wind up thinking about it. And when you actually calculate the amount of energy that's spent on that procrastination, you realize you're wasting a lot more time just thinking about that thing rather than just doing it. And it's a matter, again, of just buckling down. I mean, Islam has a lot to do with self-discipline and being able to discipline the self in order to discipline the soul. And it exists in all the little things that we do. As I said, even like a paper. You have a paper that's due, rather than procrastinating, tell yourself that you're going to finish this immediately. Because Allah Alam, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And it's the same thing with living for our deen. Making sure that you pray that salah at the time that it's supposed to be prayed, because you don't know if you're going to live to pray the next salah. And that's where when you start to eliminate the procrastination from the day-to-day life, you can eliminate it from the deen as well. So that when you find yourself not procrastinating anymore with your homework, you're also going to find yourself not procrastinating with your salah. Because you've learned how to prioritize your time. And you've learned how to kind of compartmentalize things in your life to make sure that everything fits in the right place. And then you've also learned how to balance the monochronic with the polychronic, where the activities become more important than the time. Because when you're procrastinating, essentially you're just focusing on the time. Oh, I still have time. Oh, I still have 2 weeks. I still have time. And so when you eliminate thinking about the time and you think about the activity, you get closer to the deen, inshallah. So social media and technology. How many Facebook users do we have here? See, I didn't ask Facebook addicts yet, but that's the next question. I mean, now with having Facebook on our iPhone, having Facebook on the laptop, having Facebook everywhere you go, it's a time consumer, right? It takes up a lot of time. And I've seen it. I've seen people who will tell me, oh yeah, I spent like 3 hours on Facebook today. I mean, my question is doing what? But apparently, reading up on other people's statuses, searching, seeing who said what, who did what, when. Where did this person go? What color shoes was she wearing? Looking at this picture, looking at that picture. And again, remember, everything can have good in it depending on how you use it. And so you need to ask yourself, even when you're looking at, the photos from, Cousin Beth's wedding, do you really need to see who was there? Do you need to see what so-and-so was wearing? Or is that simply going to cause a fodder for, your next conversation? And it may cause you to backbite, right? Can you believe the dress she was wearing? Right? And unfortunately, this is what this technology sometimes does for us. It lets us drop down our barriers. Things that we normally wouldn't do, or things that we normally wouldn't say, it may facilitate it. However, at the same time, on the other hand, Facebook has a lot of good in it as well. I mean, I see there's so many religious lectures that you can get on there. There's so many connections that you can make with people to help you in your need. So again, keep that front and foremost in your mind. Ask yourself in everything that you're doing, what have I done in this past 20 minutes? How have I helped my akhirah? Because again, the dunya is like a blink of an eye, right? The dunya in a snap. And subhanAllah, as a mother, I can attest to this because when I look at my 10-year-old now, almost 11, I think to myself, subhanAllah, I remember holding you. I remember changing your diaper. And it's a really scary thought because you realize how quickly the dunya goes. And you speak to anyone who's, older, and they tell you, I remember, the 1900s, like they were yesterday. I remember, what happened here. And subhanAllah, you realize it really does go in the blink of an eye. And youth is unfortunately one of the things that tends to blind us to that makes us think, along with youth comes like the sense of immortality almost. And unfortunately, that's where the procrastination also comes. And that's why, if you see, elderly people, for example, what time do they usually wake up in the morning? Muslim or non-Muslim? Okay, yes, crack of dawn, 6 a.m. or earlier. And it's because they realize that the time goes by so quickly. And so they realize how important it is to kind of take hold of whatever time is left. So that's why it's important not to wait until we get to that age where, it may be difficult to prostrate for our Salah. It may be difficult for us to go to make Hajj. And to try to really take a hold of what we can at this time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has still given us our health and our ni'mah. Right, so excessive talk, we've kind of touched upon that as well. But, and I'm sure many of you know the hadith of Rasulullah that says that in the hellfire, unfortunately, the most prevalent that he saw there was the women who were in there because of their tongue. And this can go for men too, and I've seen it honestly. Both men and women, we tend to like to talk. Maybe women a little bit more than men, but we do like to talk, And sometimes it's just like we entertain ourselves with, as I said, oh my gosh, did you see what she was wearing? Or did you see what this person did? And again, if it's idle talk, if it's talk that's not helping us in our lives in any way, if it's talk that we know will simply cause us to get punishment in the akhirah for, you really have to question if it's worth your while. Is this something that you should be doing with your time? And if it's enjoyable in the moment, is it worth, and we know the hadith that says that backbiting is like eating the flesh of your brother or your sister. Is it worth it to be eating the flesh of the brother or sister? Or is it worth it to be doing something better with the tongue? Dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what we'll regret in the day of judgment. And the last thing that's a big time waster is the clutter in life. And when I say life clutter, we all have it. And I'm not talking about the closet that's, going to explode from the clothes, although that's a part of it, or the office that has papers thrown everywhere. Again, a part of it, but not entirely. But life clutter sometimes can come from emotional issues as well. Are there people in your life that you feel like they bring you down, that they take you down the wrong path, that when you're with them, the most important thing is, oh, let's go to the mall, let's go shopping, or, the most important thing is, what party are you going to, or, what are you doing tonight, let's go hang out. Are these the type of people that you have in your life, or are you surrounding yourself with people who are truly bettering you in your deed, people who are actually taking you down the path, inshallah, that will lead towards Jannah? So there's this, another kind of a marketing theorist this time. His name is Drucker. And he came up with the theory of planned abandonment. And it's the idea that he went to stores back in the day, I don't know, maybe in the 50s or something, but he went to stores and he told them that rather than putting your items on clearance and waiting to sell them when they're on clearance and they look damaged and they don't look nice anymore, you should put things on sale prior to letting them be clearance. So basically he was telling stores, get rid of the stuff you don't need before you realize that you don't need it. what you may not need in your life and get rid of it before you put it on clearance, before the damage is already done. And so that's really an element or an idea that we can apply to our lives as well. Getting rid of those in our lives. And again, when I say getting rid of the people, we all know, we all have those influences in our lives. We all have the people who, yeah, maybe it's cool and fun to hang out with at the time, but we know that they're detrimental for us. Maybe they keep us away from our studies. Maybe they keep us away from our family. Maybe they keep us away from, going to the masjid. Maybe they keep us away from our Salah. We know these people. We recognize it. But that's the time to practice planned abandonment. It's the time to try to remove yourself from these people or try to influence them in a positive way. And again, we know that it can go either way with your friends. You can either be stronger and actually influence them towards bringing them closer to Deen, or it can go the opposite way as well. And so that's where you have to kind of evaluate your life and see which way it's going. And I keep mentioning the friends because I think in that balancing act that we're playing, that, throwing up the balls and juggling everything, friends take up a huge role, especially at this age, especially at this college age, where the friends are the people who are around you most of the time, more than your parents, more than your brothers and sisters. Unless if you're married, then hopefully your spouse is around you more. But generally speaking, the friends they play a huge role in your life at this point. And so really choosing your friends wisely, making sure that the people that you have around you are again influencing you for the good rather than for the bad. So the Rasul ﷺ says, man is influenced by the faith of his friends, therefore be careful of whom you associate with. And another hadith says, there was people came to the Rasul ﷺ and asked him, what person can be the best friend? And the Rasul answered and said, he who helps you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reminds you when you forget him. So these are the people that we need in our lives, right? And maybe when we have these people in our lives, we too can be a better influence on our friends, that maybe we can bring them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, we know that it's easy to be pulled in the wrong direction, depending on who you're hanging out with. So a question that I get often, and that's why I kind of integrated it here, is yes, you can choose your friends, and you can kind of either get closer to your friends, move further away from them, but you really can't choose your family. And we know how important in Islam the family is, right? We know how important it is to be focused on our family, to be close with our family, right? And we know that, subhanAllah, for most Muslim countries, we tend to be very collectivistic, right? Which means the focus is on the community, it's on the ummah, it's on that connection. Whereas for many non-Muslim countries, the focus is on individualism, focusing on the self. Have you guys ever heard the saying, look out for number one? What does that mean, look out for number one? You never heard the saying, look out for number one? Yes? Okay, good. Look out for yourself, exactly. Focus on yourself, that you're the most important person. And it's a conflict sometimes, trying to figure out how can I balance that looking out for myself, but at the same time being collectivistic, focusing on the ummah, loving for my brother what I love for myself, right? Or loving for my sister what I love for myself. And again, it's hard to find that balance, but it's something that we need to do. It's something that we're required to do in Islam. And it goes back to being our family being important to us as well. So how do you balance it? If you have a family that might be pulling you away from the Deen, if it's your mother, if it's your father, if it's your brothers or sisters, how do you balance that? So there's so many ayahs in the Qur'an that talk about the importance of the family and the respect that they're supposed to have. So in Surah Al-Isra, for example, there's the ayahs that say, and your Lord has decreed that you not worship except Him, and to parents good treatment, whether one or both of them reach old age while with you, say not to them so much as uff, and do not repel them, but speak to them a noble word. And lower to them the wing of humility out of mercy, and say, my Lord, have mercy upon them, as they brought me up when I was small. So we have these ayahs, and I know we've heard them before, that you don't say uff to your parents, you don't ever upset them. And yet sometimes we feel like we do, right? Sometimes we look at our parents and we're just like, oh, you don't understand me, or, forget it, I can't talk to you, you just don't understand. And especially in the teenage years, we tend to go through this, right? But we have these ayahs, and subhanAllah, when you look at that first ayah, I didn't bring the ayah up, sorry about that. When you look at that first ayah, and your Lord has decreed that you not worship except Him, and to parents good treatment. So you look at the conjunction in that ayah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, don't do shirk, right? Shirk, we know, is the worst thing in Islam. Shirk is saying that there is a God along with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Or worshiping something other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. So don't do shirk, it's the biggest sin, and to parents good treatment, in the very same sentence. So the level of how important it is to be good to your parents is almost at the same level as not doing shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. of not worshiping anyone except for him. So subhanAllah, that's the level of importance that our parents are. And this is why even if you do have a family that you feel is pulling you away from Islam, even if you feel that your family is not letting you lead on the right path, this is where you need to be stronger as an influence. This is where you need to be stronger as a Muslim, and you make sure that you kind of, through your character, you show the truth, you show the beauty of what it is that you believe in and what your actions are. Because the character speaks louder than any word. And so that's what you do with family, that you focus on really bringing them to understand how important Deen is in your life, how important Deen should be to them as well through your actions. And there's a story about a man who actually married a woman who was not very religious. And so in the beginning of his marriage, she kind of pulled him a little further and further away from Islam as well. And so at one point he had an awakening and he felt like, I want to be closer to the Deen, I want to be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he went to a sheikh and he told him, what can I do? How can I be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when my wife is pulling me further and further away? And so the sheikh told him, go home and pray, but do not tell your wife to pray with you. Go home and fast on Mondays and Thursdays. Do not tell your wife to fast with you. And he was very explicit to say, do these things, be the best Muslim that you can be, but do not stress or push your Islam on your wife. And so the man did that. And within a few weeks, he went back to the Shaykh and he told him, subhanAllah, my wife now is a better Muslim than I am even, is a better influence on me than I am even. Okay? Because through his actions, she saw the beauty of Islam. Through his ability to kind of act as a good Muslim, she saw that beauty and she accepted Islam and she moved forward as a good Muslim. And so that's how we treat our families. So even when you feel that they're pulling you away, and you think of the families of all the prophets, subhanAllah, many of them had difficulties, right? Many of them went through a lot of trouble. Sayyidina Nuh, Sayyidina Lut, all of them, and yet they didn't stray away from the Deen. They stayed steadfast on the Deen, and that is what eventually helped them and everything. Alright, so another thing those goals that we were juggling, we talked about the people, we talked about how important it is to kind of find that balance. How do you figure it out to, again, not be pulled down or not to lose your focus on the Deen because of the people. So I want you guys to take a minute here and close your eyes. Close your eyes for a second. Okay, don't fall asleep, just close your eyes. Okay. In your mind, I want you to make a list of all the people that you care for. So make a list of all the people you care for. Now open your eyes. And some of you have a very long list, or you just fell asleep, I don't know. Right, you can really open your eyes now. Right. On that list, how many of you put your parents? Okay, especially after that ayah we just talked about, right? How many put your spouse, or your siblings, or your relatives? How many of you put your friends? How many of you put yourself? Okay. Alright, we got one person and themselves on the list. Okay. Many of us in our day-to-day life, when we're focusing so much on caring for other people, when we're focusing so much on thinking about other people, we forget to put ourselves on that list. We forget that we're important too, that we need to take care of ourselves to make sure that we can take care of others, to make sure that we can focus on taking care of our own hearts, our own qulub, because on the day of judgment, we're going to be asked about our own actions. We're going to be asked about what we did as individuals on this earth, right? Not what our brother did or what our friend did. We're going to be asked about ourselves. And that's why it's so important to make sure that we make it to that list as well. So I put this picture here in relation to what we're talking about. Has anyone traveled on an airplane recently? And what do they tell you when they come up and they start doing this presentation? What do they always say about the masks? Exactly. You put the mask on yourself first before you put it on anyone else. Even if you're traveling with a small child, even if you're traveling with someone who's older, you put it on yourself first. And why is it so important to put it on yourself first?
Because the person will go crazy and stuff, and then if you pass out, then they'll suffer.
Okay, good, because you can't help anyone until you help yourself, right? Okay. So that's the whole point, that you really can't help anyone until you help yourself. And the same goes for our Deen. That if you don't help yourself, if you don't strengthen your own Deen, if you don't strengthen your own Iman, you're not going to be there to help others. You're not going to be there to be able to lead the family members or the friends on the better path. And so that's why it's really, you ask yourself also, who is flying your plane? I mean, who takes the lead in your life? Is it you who's really making the decisions and recognizing that you're the one who's responsible for yourself on the day of judgment, or is it others? Right, another really important thing, and I bring this up in marriage marriage lectures all the time too, is expecting change and accepting change. Recognizing that no matter what you're doing in your life, it's not always going to be smooth sailing. That you're not always going to move in the same direction. That it's kind of like a roller coaster ride, right? Where you're going to sometimes be going up and sometimes you're going to drop. But even when you're dropping, knowing that it'll go back up, inshallah. So recognizing that even when you're juggling a million things in your life, and if you drop one, you get into a fight with a friend, you fail a test, or the whole semester is not going well for you, or whatever's going on in your life, again, that just as it goes down, it'll go back up. And just like I showed you with those goals, most of them will bounce right back up, right? Except for the Iman, except for the Deen. And I mentioned this ayah before in the beginning as well from Surah Al-Baqarah, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. So subhanAllah, that we should really constantly remind ourselves of, and that we should constantly say, because the English translation of it is, on no soul does Allah place a burden greater than it can bear. It gets every good that it earns, and it suffers every ill that it earns. Pray our Lord, condemn us not if we forget or fall into error. Our Lord, lay not on us a burden like that which Thou didst lay on those before us. Our Lord, lay not on us a burden greater than we have strength to bear. So that ayah, subhanAllah, really encompasses what we're talking about. That it's every individual is responsible for their own actions, yet recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never place a burden on anyone that's greater than they can handle. So it's a good reminder to know that even when you're in the midst of this balancing act, even when you're juggling everything and you feel like it's all going to come crashing down around you, to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's best for you. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide you, inshallah, to the path that's best, even if it's not apparent at that time. But really what you think is best may not be what's truly best for you. Another important thing to remember, I've been talking about the Deen, I've been talking about balancing, making sure that you focus on the Salah, making sure that you really make your intention so that everything you do in life turns into a worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's also important to remember that the Deen of Islam is a Deen of moderation, that it's not one of extremes. And there's a hadith on the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam where 3 men came to him and they said, we want to become perfect in our religion, we want to become very, very good in our religion. So what we're going to do, the first one said, I'm going to pray every night, all night long. And the second man said, I'm going to fast all the time, every day, without breaking my fast. And the third one said, I'm going to withdraw from women and I'm never going to marry, I'm going to be celibate. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who never used to get angry, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who at one point, there's another beautiful story where the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw a man come into the masjid and he went to the bathroom, he urinated in the masjid. And the Sahaba got very, very upset and they wanted to go and get angry at him. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, no, don't, just leave him. And when he finished, he said, let him finish. And when he finished, he called the man over and he spoke to him. So this same man who doesn't really get angry often, suddenly when these people came and said, I'm going to do this to be good in my religion, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this, when they went to extremes, he became angry. And the Sahaba knew that he was becoming angry because there was a vein between his eyebrows that on the very few occasions that he would become angry, it would throb a little bit, it would pulsate a little bit. And they saw that they pulsated. And the reason why the Rasul became angry at this statement was because these people were going to extremes. They were taking the Deen and making it something extreme. And so he responded to that and he said, I pray some of the night and I sleep some of the night. And I fast the day and I break the fast at night. And I marry. So how can you be above that? How can you be better than that? And so it was so important to him to make sure that people recognize that our Deen is not one of usr, it is not one of difficulty, it is one of ease. And that you don't neglect the worldly affairs and say, that's it, I'm going to live in the masjid, lock myself up, and that's it, because that's not Islam either. Islam is living the life, right? Making sure that you do everything in your life, but you do it in the halal way that will gain you sawab in the akhirah. And again, subhanAllah, our Deen is so moderate that in everything you do, you can get sawab. That you can earn a good deed just from walking towards the masjid. Right? Even if you never actually make it there, if you get caught up, still, the ground will make dua for you on the day of judgment that you had the intention of going to the masjid. Right? You get sawab just for, again, coming to a lecture with the intention of learning. There's sawab in that. So there's so much good that we can earn in the things that we do. There's another hadith that I wanted to share with you. that was narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, where the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, a man shall be asked concerning 5 things on the day of resurrection. Concerning his life, how he spent it. Concerning his youth, how he grew old. Concerning his wealth, once he acquired it, and in what way he spent it. And what was it that he did with the knowledge that he had. So these are the things that we're going to be asked about, right? So we're not going to be asked about, what color shoes we wore to the party, right? We're not going to be asked about, who we hung out with in the cafeteria on this day. These are not the things that are going to make up the most important end, right? That's going to make up on the day of judgment. We're going to determine, essentially, where we're going to be. And so the most important things are our life, how it was spent, our youth, how we grew old, our wealth, where it came from and how it was spent, and what it is that we did with the knowledge. So these are the things that we have to question all the time and ask ourselves, are we doing right with these things? Are we using all of these ni'am that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to benefit? So really in the end, what do we have to show when our time is up? I mean, when this blink of an eye, and as I said again, as a mother, I see it. When I see my children literally growing up before my eyes, you recognize how really brief this life is. How quick it's over, subhanAllah. And so in the end, you ask yourself, what do you have to show? I mean, what have you done with that life that you were given? And again, there's that ayah, and it may be that you dislike a thing which is good for you, and that you like a thing which is bad for you. Allah knows what you do not know. And that's something that we always have to kind of maintain in our lives, and remember, as we're going through, again, the stresses, the ups and downs, the day-to-day, the not being sure, am I going to do well on this test or not? Am I going to be okay with this person? Am I going to marry the person that I want to marry, or am I not? Am I going to resolve this conflict or not? And really just remembering that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of all planners, and having that tawakkul, so not the tawakkul, which is a whole other lecture, but having that tawakkul, that knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of all planners, but you must do what you're supposed to do in order to get there. And keeping that in mind, inshallah. So أقول قولي هذا وأستغفرك وأتوب إليه. If I've said anything good, know that's from Allah. If I've said anything bad, know that it is from myself and from shaitan. So if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to ask them.
What books would you recommend on this specific topic or more in detail with the specifics of this extensive topic?
My books? No. Okay. There's a lot of fiqh books that go into detail in terms of essentially like what you do, like your day-to-day, And I think it's the fiqh book. Have you ever looked at, for instance, like Reliance of the Traveler? I don't know, big book, like that big maybe. But Reliance of the Traveler is it's a Malakina time. But in it, it has all of the information for your day-to-day living. I mean, what you need to know, how to wake up, how to walk, how to move. And I think those kind of books, the 50 books that really go into detail in terms of what is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all that we do, that helps clarify for you, even on a personal level, you really understand it and are able to integrate it in your life. So that's what I would recommend, really going back to an essential fiqh book that explains things in details. I can't think of anything, but if you give me your email address, I can check inshallah and I can get back to you. Are there any other questions?
Thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask you, born a Muslim or a believer?
I'm sorry.
Born a Muslim or you're a believer?
No, alhamdulillah, I'm born a Muslim. Yeah. We're all born Muslims. All of us are born Muslims, but right, there's believer or I guess ethnically, yes, my background, my family, Muslim for many generations.
She was asking because of your name, Suzy.
I always get that question. Yes. No, a funny story with my name. When my parents first immigrated here, they came from Egypt. They came here to this country thinking that they had to assimilate, of course, there's a huge difference between assimilation and acculturation, which at the time they didn't recognize. So my older sister, my mom decided she had to have an American name that worked here. So the only person she knew at the time was a hairdresser in the mall, and her name was Nancy. So she named my oldest sister Nancy, right? Because she thought, that's good, they're never going to know that she's an Arab, with the name Nancy. And so when I was born a year and a half later, they had no idea what to name me. So Nancy, the hairdresser, had gotten my older sister Nancy a doll, and she was called Cutie Suzy. And so they said, that's it, we'll call her Suzy. So I'm really Suzy. So, and the funny thing is that, subhanAllah, ironically, as you get closer and closer to your deen, with my third sister, who was born 6 years later, they named her Deen, which is not an Islamic name, but it's a cultural name, like it's an Egyptian name. With my last sister, who was born 17 years later, they named her Rahma. So by that time, I think, alhamdulillah, they were secure enough in their deen, secure enough in their ability to recognize the difference between assimilating in a culture and acculturating, to know that they can name her Rahma and she'll be just fine. So, alhamdulillah.
Talking about like family, don't say anything through your heart. What if you see like a lot of things that are right? You want to say something, you don't want to hear it. So what's the best way to let you hear it?
I think it's a very good question, but again, we should always look for examples in the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you look at the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his uncle, and you know that his uncle, he was very, very dear to him, and but his uncle, even on his death, did not become a Muslim, right? And yet he didn't he didn't disown him. He didn't say, that's it, I'm not going to hang out with my uncle anymore, or that's it, I have nothing to do with him. He continued to be by him, and he continued to try to give him nasihat, but in a way that was not obtrusive. So only through his actions. And there's a really nice story about the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam where there was a woman who used to always throw garbage at him as he would walk down the street. And she would say vile, horrible things at him. And so one day he was walking down the street and he didn't see her. She wasn't throwing any garbage. So he asked about her. He said, what happened? Why is the old woman not throwing garbage at me? And so they told him, well, she's sick. So he went to visit her. And so when he went to visit her, she said to him, how could you come visit me? I say terrible things to you. I throw garbage at you. And so he told her, because in Islam, it is a sunnah, so I have to go visit the sick. And so, based on that, she took the shahada. She declared her Islam. And it was only because of his actions, because he gave what he was treated badly with, he responded with good. And that's what we really have to take from that. That with our family, yes, we may see things wrong happening. It's not that you don't say, this is wrong, give nasiha, but you don't do it in a way where the kid is off, where you say, this is wrong, or you raise your voice, or you get angry at them. You always respect that they are, at the end of the day, your parents, regardless of whether they're practicing, whether they're Muslim, non-Muslim. They have that level of respect that really, nothing else comes close to it. And so you maintain that level of respect, you do it through your actions, and again, you give nasiha in a way that's not obtrusive. Any other questions?
Earlier you said that Iman fluctuates. Yeah. I was lucky, fortunate enough to see that this year. I realized that during Ramadan and a couple weeks after, my Iman is at its highest. And that's because I've isolated myself from hanging out from certain people, everybody.
Yes.
And but as soon as I start hanging out and maybe going out to local bars, that's what people my age do nowadays. Yeah. It starts decreasing once again. So is it black and white? Is Iman a black and white thing? Can you only be strict, so strict that you're not associating with your people you grew up with? Or is there some meanings to the concept?
I mean, one of the most important things is for us to constantly repeat the dua as which is, changer of the hearts, maintain my heart on your path, on your Iman, on your faith. Okay? So this is first and foremost, to constantly make that dua, to make that intention, and to recognize that our Iman does fluctuate up and down. Second of all, as I said, once you are strong in your Iman, once you are strong in your actions, in your deeds, and of course the faith is through practice. So one person, and I've seen people who said, I'm very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I just don't pray. Or I'm very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I just don't fast. But I'm close to Him. But the way that you get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through your love. And the way you show love is by doing the things that are pleasing to you. So even if you love a person, you do things to please that person, right? And so that's when you show your love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's through your actions. So if you feel that hanging out with a certain group of people is going to take you away from that, it's not necessarily to cut them off, but when you're with them, say, guys, it's time for something, look, I'm getting up to pray. Right? Or even don't say it, get up and pray in front of them. If you're in that hookah bar, which I know is a big issue these days with the youth, it's the popular thing to do. But if you're there and you know that you don't feel comfortable there, but at the same time, your brothers, whoever, they're all going, and you go and you choose not to do it. And then they're like, come on, man, just do it, In that situation, that's a perfect situation to kind of say, what, this harms the health, and anything that harms the health, Islamically, I'm not going to do it because it's not worth it. In that, you're taking a stand. My preference would be stay away completely. The guys want to hang out, so hey guys, let's go to the pizza place instead. Try with alternatives. And it's not easy. reward in being able to do that.
Okay, so my question was about polychronic, was it, and monochronic? Polychronic, from what I understood, was being able to, having things in, having the activity more credit at the time. And monochronic, if I'm not mistaken, is having the time more important than activity.
Yes.
But I mean, I was a little confused about that because I thought like Islam was more monochronic. Like, like your Salah is in a fixed time, that you can't do it anywhere. And like you said, like errands, like people, like certain people end up being late for everything and putting that to like one extreme to the point that, I don't know, is it
The best way to view it is when you think of a monochronic culture, it's the concept that time is money. That wasting time and salah, ibadah, faith would be considered a waste of time. Right? Anything that's not materialistic is a waste of time. And that's a monochronic society. Whereas a polychronic society, it's more like the value of life. So even a non-Muslim country can be polychronic, but they value the benefit of life. So for instance, family time is more important. For instance, when you go to some countries where people have to take a siesta in the afternoon, when work literally stops and people take a siesta. That's a polychronic concept because it's more important for you to take care of your health, to take care of how you are as an individual than to make sure that you're constantly cranking things out. I'll give you an example. When I first started teaching actually in the Middle East, I was teaching for the U.S. Embassy there actually. And I went to class and my schedule had set on a class begins at like 9:30 or something. So I'm all gung-ho and I'm there at like 9:25, and I put my stuff down and I'm ready to go. So like 10 o'clock comes, nobody's there. 10:30 comes, nobody's there. 11 o'clock, finally people start straggling in. So I'm like, okay, cool, maybe I had the timing wrong. I teach, and I think the class was supposed to be over at 12. So at 12, of course, I hadn't covered the material, but I told them, okay, we're not done covering the material, we're kind of mid-chapter, but we'll take it from here tomorrow, inshallah. And then I closed the book. And everybody just kind of sat there, like, staring at me, like, okay. And so I'm like, okay, no, we're done. Like, when my schedule says I'm finished, it's 12. And they're like, yeah, but you didn't finish the material. And I'm like, yeah, but the time says that class is done. And so we were both very agitated because for them, their other class had run over because the information that he was giving was very interesting. And so they felt like they couldn't leave. So the other class had run over, so they didn't see any harm with my class running over as well, even if it meant that we're going to be late for the next class 2 hours. I couldn't wrap my head around that. I'm like, but how? There's a schedule, It says 12 o'clock. And that's the difference in monochronic and polychronic. Because we've been trained in the West that if your schedule says 9 to 12, that's it, 12 o'clock on the dot. 11:59, people are packing up, They're not even going to wait till 12. Whereas in a polychronic society, it's so much more important for them to get the information that they need. Okay? So I don't know if that clarifies it a little bit. And that's where Islam is more polychronic, where it's more, yes, time, the salah has a time, absolutely, it's a fixed entity, but it's not the time that's important, it is the salah that's important. We do the salah in that time because that's what's commanded of us, and it's commanded of us as a form of worship. And so we do it for the sake of worshiping, not for the sake of the time.
So it's more important to do things and get the benefit from it than do things for the sake of it.
Yes, that's how a polychronic culture usually uses it. Are there any other questions? Yes, question is that?
You talked about the one extreme where you have another extreme too.
Where you don't pray at all?
Yeah, like that extreme.
Yes, that is a bad extreme. That's why the deen is one of moderation. I mean, we all know when the Rasul ﷺ was commanded initially for us to pray 500 times a day, right? We know the story about S.A.W, right? And we were initially commanded to pray 500 times a day. And then Sayyidina Musa kept telling him, no, go back, that's too much, And he kept going back until it came down to 5. And even then, Sayyidina Musa said, go back. That 5 is too much, nobody's going to pray 5 times a day. And the Rasul ﷺ said, no, I'm not going to go back at this point, 5 is fine, And subhanAllah, because 5 is definitely doable. And you think about the time that it takes for salah, I mean, it's less time than you probably spend, chatting to your friends or hanging out or something. So it's definitely, it's a deen of moderation. And moderation is to do the fard, complete the fard, and also work towards completing the sunnah, because there's only benefit in that. Any other questions? Alright, just oh, there is one more? Okay.
Just a comment that if you actually make an effort to spend a lot, it's very easy.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like work. If you really do that all of how much time, it's going to be that much harder. If you just do it, it's so easy. It's like 5 minutes.
Yes, subhanAllah. And they say that it takes 30 days for anything to become a habit, right? But it takes only 7 days to break a habit. So if you go for 30 days of making sure your salah is on time, it becomes so easy, it becomes habitual. You don't even think of it, right? But if you go for 7 days without breaking, without, continuing salah on time, it's hard to get back into it. It's hard to get back into this kind of thing. So it's important to maintain.
So what about making it up? Like, you can't do it in that time.
Making up your salahs that you've missed. I mean, and that's where really we have that deen al-yusr rather than usr. What we have is a deen of ease, a religion of ease rather than a religion of hardship. You really need to strive as much as possible to make your salah on time. However, if there is that situation that you're not able to, there is salah al-adha, which is you pray the salah with the next prayer. So, but you don't miss that. And that's what's so important for us to train our body. We talked about disciplining the soul. And really the salah is a purification. So it's not only a disciplining of the self and the soul, but a purification of the self and the soul too. So as much as possible, strive to make it. But somebody had once asked me, well, I don't pray anything all day long. So I'm going to start by just praying Salat al-Isha. Is that okay? And so honestly, it really is a question of you are commanded to pray 5 times a day. It's something that you personally need to strive for. By saying, since I don't do anything, I'm just going to do one, and that should be sufficient. Really, you can't bargain with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're given the commandments, and they're not there for us to be like, okay, I think I'll do 3 today, maybe 2 tomorrow, maybe I'll throw 1. It's not given to us to be bargaining. So it's really, we know what the commandment is. It's a matter of actually doing it.
You can't really make it up. You miss it intentionally.
If you miss it intentionally, it's only, for instance, in traveling, and there's different schools of fiqh about this. Some schools of fiqh believe that if you're traveling, you can do jam'a, where you do, if it's over 50 miles, you can combine the salahs, the Dhikr and the Asr and the Maghrib and the Isha, for example. But again, it depends on the madhab that you follow, and it depends on the school of fiqh that you follow. And also, guys, it's really important, you can't pick and choose from your madhab, okay? So you can't say, Maliki here, and Hanafi here, so really whatever madhab you choose to study under is a madhab you should follow. See, as humans, it's so easy for us to make excuses for ourselves. We always try to find out. It's like, I didn't hand the paper in on time because I stayed up really late the night before. And what's your teacher going to tell you? Like if you tell your teacher, listen, sorry, I'm going to hand my paper in tomorrow. I just didn't have time to do it because I was sleeping. What's your teacher going to tell you?
Not going to accept it.
Okay, exactly, So it's the same thing. If you are habitually sleeping, if you're habitually turning off the alarm clock and you're not getting up as well, ask yourself, is it because you're sleeping too late at night maybe? Is it because you need a louder alarm clock? Is it because you need, someone to bang you on the head, to wake you up? So really, we tend to make excuses for ourselves in areas where there shouldn't be that many excuses, And again, it's discipline. It's a matter of disciplining the self, and it helps to discipline the soul. So, and inshallah, all of us can always better ourselves, and that's really what we should always strive for. But once we start making excuses for ourselves, it becomes easy not to strive for bettering ourselves, And it's just like I said, like the paper or the homework. The one time that the teacher says, okay, you don't have to hand it in today, the next time, you're going to be like, oh, it's fine. She didn't care, so it's fine. I'll just hand it in later. And so it becomes so easy to get into that habit. So it's dangerous territory to be in. Yeah. How about it?
Can you go back to the part where you were speaking about Yemen? I don't know if that right.
About what?
About the Jamma.
Oh, about Jamma, again, there's some of them that believe that in travel you can't ijma, some of them believe that you can ijma. In the methods that I follow, if you travel 50 miles or more, then it's a sunnah to have Dhuhr and Asr Jamma and Qasr, which means you pray it shorter, so it's 2 rak'ahs and 2 rak'ahs, and you combine them together. I'm sorry, was that?
Can I bring up an example?
Yeah, bring up an example.
Yeah, my brother was going to school in Manhattan, and he was doing Jamma for Dhuhr and Asr.
Okay.
And they made fun of him, be like, hey, you just...
Okay.
And I don't know if it did or not, because we live in Brooklyn, and the school's in Manhattan, so...
Okay, there's also a hadith that explains that if you are continuing in a place for more than 7 days, then it's supposed to be on a journey. So when you're traveling on a journey. So for instance, let's say I'm going to, Kuala Lumpur. I'm going to spend the whole summer there. I can't ijma the whole entire summer, I can't do that for 3 months straight. It's supposed to be for a period of the journey. Well, Allah, of course. And again, I just want to clarify that said, I have not studied Sharia, I have not studied fiqh, so all the knowledge that I have is simply from scholars that I've learned under or that I've read. So please, if there's anything that you're not sure about, I really highly recommend that you double check. Yeah? Yes. Yes. And again, I'm only going to answer this from the knowledge that I know. My understanding is that if you study under a certain madhab, you should follow that madhab. That's my understanding. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail with it because it's not an area that I fully studied. So my understanding is that when you have one madhab, that you should follow it rather than picking and choosing and saying, okay, I'm going to follow the Hanafi in this, I'm going to follow this and that. So, and Allah A'lam. But I would definitely encourage you to look into that more. There was another question over there? Okay. And again, honestly, I think, I'm sure you guys invite different shuyukh here all the time and people who are actually more knowledgeable in fiqh than I am. So I really recommend that you ask them those kind of questions. That's it, right? Okay. All right, jazakallah khair. As-salamu alaykum.